My unfaithful wife conspired to take my wealth, got pregnant by her lover, and faced a monumental downfall. To be honest, I'm not quite sure how the final moments of my marriage played out. When Candace came back from her conference, I was soaring at 30,000 feet in the air. I like to imagine she came home, greeted me warmly, expressed how much she missed me, and felt happy to return. Maybe she expected me to have dinner ready like always. Perhaps her smile faded when she found the printouts exposing her recent affairs with my boss, her boss, a close friend, and even my lawyer alongside divorce papers and a prenup. I'd like to believe she was furious, but the truth is, I'll never really know. A month ago, her cheating blindsided me. At 27, I'm set to inherit $70 million when I turn 32, and that inheritance is at the core of my current problems. Despite my wealth, I worked as an accountant in Melbourne, raised to treat everyone with respect, regardless of their background. I became an orphan at 21 after a devastating plane crash, inheriting the family fortune. However, I never flaunted my riches. I met Candace one evening, leading to an affair I now regret after a single night of recklessness. Candace and I stumbled into a surprising discovery: we genuinely liked each other. It was an ironic twist of fate, considering that she had been comforting a friend who had just found out about her boyfriend's cheating. In the months that followed, our relationship grew through casual dates until exclusivity became the natural next step. During those early stages, Candace seemed unaffected by my financial situation. She was carving out a successful career at one of the top marketing firms in the city, earning a respectable income. In hindsight, I believed our marriage was flourishing. As a young, affluent couple, we rarely ate at home, preferring the city's finest dining options. Weekdays were filled with joint gym sessions, and Saturdays were dedicated to city adventures, whether it was savoring gourmet food, dancing at clubs, or laughing at a local comedy venue. When I recall the moment I proposed, I can't help but shudder at the glaring contrast between that moment and what I know now. Back then, her acceptance made me feel incredibly fortunate, even though she was considered rather ordinary by most. As our 2-year marriage progressed, conversations about starting a family surfaced. Yet, in hindsight, this marked the beginning of our downfall. Candace's frequent work trips didn't raise any red flags at first. After all, trust is a fundamental part of love, right? But it was when my manager and partner, George, announced a lengthy business trip that my suspicions grew. His departure coincided with Candace's upcoming 3-week conference, a coincidence that seemed harmless at first. It wasn't until a chance encounter with an intern named Iona that the truth began to emerge. As she entered my office shortly after George's announcement, Iona's demeanor suggested something serious. "Hi, Thomas," she greeted, causing me to pause my work on a corporate spreadsheet. Little did I know that her presence would reveal a truth I was not prepared for. Iona Brown was petite but striking, with long golden hair, piercing blue eyes, and an air of sophistication despite her modest wardrobe. In 3 months, her internship would end, and she planned to travel around Australia before heading to Germany to reunite with family. Although we had only shared brief conversations over coffee, I found her honesty refreshing, and she was uncompromising when it came to ethics. I noticed her serious expression and sensed the weight of the conversation to come. "Is everything all right?" I asked, my brow furrowed with concern. After a brief pause, she asked for a private chat over lunch. We ended up at a popular downtown sandwich spot, where she unexpectedly reached for my hand, sparking my curiosity. Her flushed cheeks and an apology revealed a vulnerability I hadn't expected. Feeling a knot form in my stomach, I knew this conversation would have significant consequences. Memories of past difficulties surfaced, filling me with dread. Though I tried to stay calm, I couldn't shake the growing unease. "It's okay, Iona," I reassured her, trying to mask my own nervousness. "But I'm worried." "What's on your mind?" Over the next 20 minutes, Iona told me how she overheard George discussing plans to entertain some guests in 2 weeks. Blushing, she admitted that she had covertly taken photos of George embracing a mysterious woman who turned out to be Candace, my wife. Shocked, I stared at the incriminating picture. Iona recognized Candace from a photo on my desk and expressed her regret. I felt sick to my stomach as the reality of the betrayal set in. Trying to regain control of my emotions, Iona gently touched my arm, bringing me back to the moment. Struggling to speak, I thanked her for her concern, but admitted that legal action would be necessary. However, Iona hesitated, revealing another troubling detail. The following week, my lawyer would be accompanying George and Candace. As panic began to set in, I struggled with the harsh reality that money was at the root of this betrayal. In a brief moment of clarity mixed with revulsion, I decided to excuse myself by pretending to be ill, buying some time. With resolve hidden behind inner turmoil, I concluded that I had to leave in order to calm down and come up with a plan to face the impending wave of deception and treachery. "Have Mary call Candace and tell her I'm sick and going to the doctor," I instructed our office manager, who also served as our assistant bookkeeper. Abruptly standing, Iona rose with me. "I can't thank you enough," I said, forcing a strained smile. Your honesty probably saved me from a disastrous situation. Please share this with Mary and keep it between us. Iona nodded immediately, reaffirming her loyalty with a quiet apology in German. I'm sorry, Thomas. I hope you won't hold it against me, I reassured her by extending my hand. No hard feelings. I owe you. Consider me a friend for life. With shared smiles, we parted ways. I then went to a restroom and forced myself to vomit to maintain the illusion of illness. After a brief call, I arranged a doctor's appointment, securing a sick note and medication for a supposed stomach bug. Leaving the clinic, I was resolute in taking action. I drove to a nearby hotel, checked in, and settled into my room. Not long after, Candace called, concerned about my health. Continuing the charade, I assured her I was fine but needed rest and requested she bring me some clothes and toiletries. Although I was surprised by her genuine concern, I couldn't shake my suspicions about her loyalty given what I had just learned. I'll be better in a few days, Candace, I assured her, faking a cough. We chatted briefly. But the image of Candace and George together, courtesy of Iona's revelation, stuck in my mind. When the call ended, doubt lingered, pushing me to act. With my laptop and satchel in hand, I searched for private investigators online. After reaching out to several agencies, I secured a meeting with one for the next morning and arranged a consultation with a rival law firm. Bradman Torrance Clark. Unable to sleep, I spent the night tossing and turning, tormented by uncertainty. Despite Candace's concerned call the next morning, my suspicions only deepened. Though I considered other explanations, I couldn't ignore the evidence Iona had shown me. Determined to get to the truth, I checked out of the BB, informed the front desk of my return later, and called for a car to take me to the discreet investigators. Inside, I recounted the situation to a careful investigator named Norm, who ensured our conversation was private before we proceeded. After showing him the incriminating photos, I asked for surveillance on both my wife and my boss. I need to know the truth before I take any further steps, I insisted, seeking clarity amidst the chaos. Norm immediately noticed my hesitation and asked, "Is there something else on your mind?" Collecting my thoughts, I explained, "I'm not completely sure what's going on, but there's talk of money involving my wife and my boss, and with a large trust fund in my future, I need to be certain you understand the stakes." After a brief pause, Norm returned with paperwork detailing their confidentiality agreement and financial terms, assuring me they could handle everything I needed. I signed the forms, sealing our agreement with a handshake. Norm assured me surveillance would begin by the end of the day. Feeling somewhat relieved, I headed to my meeting with Ranwick Johnston, our longtime family attorney. Despite his trustworthiness, recent events left me no choice but to seek legal advice from Damon Torrance. Eager to win my business, Damon wasted no time addressing my concerns when I arrived. After explaining my suspicions of collusion between my wife, boss, and attorney, I expressed my urgent need for legal defense. Bracing myself for the upcoming storm, I prepared for what lay ahead. Lawyers are often portrayed as cold and indifferent, focused only on profit. Damon Torrance fit this stereotype, dressed in a sharp suit and working from an imposing office overlooking Melbourne. After hearing my story, Damon turned to the window, gazing at the city. "You like a challenge, don't you?" he remarked with a sly grin, offering an appealing proposition. He promised a 25% discount on services and extra billable hours if I transferred my business to his firm. Intrigued, I questioned his motives. Addressing me by name, Damon emphasized the value of having me as a client, citing potential benefits for both sides. Recognizing his strategic approach, I admired his salesmanship. For the next hour, we finalized the terms, and I signed the contract with help from his efficient assistant. Damon mentioned hearing from Norm at discreet investigation and suggested involving him in matters concerning my current lawyer. Grateful for his advice, as I left impressed by Damon's shrewdness and the firm's hospitality. As I paused to consider his suggestion, I agreed to brunch on Sunday morning, knowing the importance of staying low-key until everything was resolved. Later that day, I reviewed our bills, setting up alerts for any transactions over $1,000, wary of potential fraud. That night, George's email and Candace's call seemed normal, yet their lack of concern for changing plans worried me. Norm's update confirmed the surveillance was in place, advising patience, as people rarely altered their schemes overnight. By Saturday afternoon, my worst fears were confirmed. Surveillance had captured Candace involved in a scandalous rendezvous at a nearby hotel. Disgusted, I checked out and returned home to prepare for brunch with Damon as planned. Returning to my apartment, memories of my closeness with Candace clashed painfully with her infidelity. Overwhelmed, I vowed never to stay in such a tainted place again. An hour later, I arrived at Damon's penthouse in downtown Melbourne via Uber. His wife, Mel, and daughter, Colleen, greeted me and kept me entertained for the next hour. Despite Colleen's surprising mix of sophistication and modesty, I enjoyed a delightful brunch with them before she excused herself, leaving just Damon, Mel, and me. Observing Damon's casual attire, I couldn't help but note the contrast from our earlier encounter. He laughed at my observation, explaining that while his professional demeanor was necessary, his invitation came from genuine friendship. Mel expressed her sympathy by sharing her own experience of being betrayed in her first marriage. Damon gently comforted her, emphasizing that my current predicament was far more serious than hers had been. Reflecting on her difficult past, Mel sympathized with my pain, recounting how she discovered her first husband's affair. Damon's law firm had helped her through the divorce, but their relationship had developed separately from that event. Damon smiled at his wife, saying, "My story's a bit different." He then explained that he had been engaged to a woman named Cherry, but they parted ways because she didn't approve of the long hours required by his role as a law partner. It wasn't a dramatic breakup, just a parting of ways, he added. About a month before Mel's divorce was finalized, they met at a coffee shop downstairs. I was immediately drawn to her, pregnant, and all he continued. "You mean," I interrupted, glancing at Mel, who blushed as they confirmed. "Yes, Colleen is Lawrence's daughter," Mel explained. Damon added, "I found out a few weeks later, but it didn't change how I felt. I officially adopted Colleen when she was 2. After Mel and I got married, Lawrence was relieved to sign the papers. Happy to avoid child support, we sat in silence for a moment, taking in this revelation. Finally, I broke the quiet with a sip of my coffee. "What happened to Lawrence?" I asked. Damon chuckled. "He contracted multiple STDs over the next year, and we lost touch. Last we heard, he was living in a shared house and working customer service for a telecom company." He sighed. "If that makes him happy, then so be it. But he owed Mel honesty," Damon remarked, squeezing Mel's hand. Mel returned the affectionate gesture. "True, but Colleen came out of that, and I can't regret it despite the pain she reflected." Damon nodded, a bit more reserved now. Our conversation continued as Colleen joined us briefly before heading back to her room to chat with friends on Discord. "And what about you?" Thomas Mel asked, refilling our coffee cups with her perfectly brewed blend. I glanced at Damon, raising an eyebrow, but he waved off any formality. "You're not under interrogation," he reassured me. "Just friends lending support." It was the first genuine smile I had managed since all of this began. I stared into my coffee, as if hoping to find some clarity. "No," I began, realizing Damon had likely shared some details about my financial situation. Mel shook her head, smiling. "No, he just mentioned you were going through a tough time and hinted at your wife's affair," she revealed. Damon's look urged me to share more. "Well," I started, taking a deep breath. "Candace and I have been married for a while now. We were even thinking about starting a family. But a colleague at work exposed that she's been having an affair with my boss." Damon nodded, taking in the confession. "It appears this has been happening for quite a while, given their attendance at various conferences over the years," he remarked. "From the reports, videos, and photos I've seen, everything seems to fit what you've suspected," he added. I blushed as the confirmation sank in. "So, the first step is to handle things at home. They all need to go," I declared, noticing a brief glimmer in Damon's eyes that he quickly tried to hide. "It's okay, Damon. I know you thrive on challenges," I teased, and he chuckled while I sighed, shifting my gaze from the coffee cup to the couple, then out toward the calm Melbourne skyline. The peaceful weekend scene offered a fleeting sense of calm. "I'll start by getting a full report from Norm," I suggested, and Damon agreed. "Then, I'll enforce the terms of the prenup with Candace and pursue legal action against everyone involved," I continued. Damon chuckled, but Mel's expression became serious. "Thomas," she said, leaning in, "it's important to deal with these matters, but what about you personally? Your wealth seems to be a central part of this betrayal. Your situation appears more serious than mine ever was." Her gaze softened. "You've been betrayed by those closest to you." I struggled with my own feelings of inadequacy, and based on what you've shared, your experience may be even more challenging," she empathized. "It probably hasn't fully hit you yet," she added. "It took me weeks to come to terms with everything. You're going to need help support, and likely therapy," she advised sincerely. I shrugged, acknowledging her advice. "Maybe," I admitted, turning my attention back to the city view. "I'm serious, Thomas," she pressed on. "Damon and I want to stand by you. He's a force in the workplace, but he's also very selective about our social circle. The fact that you're here this morning says a lot about how much he values you." I looked at them, surprised. Damon blushed slightly and shrugged. "I don't make friends easily," he admitted. "You're a lot like me, successful, sharp, and no nonsense," he noted, glancing at his wife. "After hearing your story, Mel and I thought we could be a source of support for you," he explained. I was touched. I hadn't expected such kindness or concern, especially from a lawyer. For the next couple of hours, we spoke more openly about my situation. Mel highlighted the emotional strain, and by the time I left to check into another hotel across town, I felt emotionally exhausted but, for the first time, supported. Later that evening, I spoke briefly with Candace, who acted as though everything was normal. But during our conversation, I received Norm's report, and I timed her call against the incriminating video. Damon had advised me to keep going to the office until he had all the legal documents in order. I tried, but by late Tuesday morning, Iona approached me, clearly noticing my distress. "Thomas, you look terrible." "Did you find something out?" she asked quietly, trying not to attract attention. I nodded slowly. "It's worse than we discussed," I replied, unable to hide my frustration. Iona gave me a sympathetic look. "I'm truly sorry, Thomas. I hate that I was the one who had to tell you this." Her German accent gave weight to the word sorry. "Don't be," I reassured her, feeling a sudden determination. "Without you, I'd still be in the dark." She then asked me to explain further, and I gave her a simplified version, sparing her the graphic details. As I finished, I noticed tears welling up in her eyes. Fortunately, we were in my office, away from the prying eyes of others. I couldn't help but question if anyone at the company was aware of William's knowledge about the affair. Iona suggested we meet for dinner that evening, as she felt I might not be able to maintain my composure if I shared everything in a public setting. Agreeing, we both left shortly after work, with only 4 days remaining in her internship. Later that afternoon, Mary, our office manager, gave me a peculiar look in the hallway after lunch. She had spent hours conversing with William. Pretending to stay productive for the rest of the day, I kept a close eye on both men. Over the past week, I had grown to trust Damon, my new lawyer and confidant. After multiple conversations with both him and Mel, who was part of their close circle, I contacted my investigator, eager for updates. "What's the latest intel?" "Is it worse than we thought?" I asked. Norm's next words snapped me out of the confusion that had gripped me all week. "They've been talking about getting rid of you in about 3 years, he revealed. Damon and I reacted simultaneously, shocked. What I gasped. Norm explained further, "Not right away, but they've discussed the possibility of ending your life in a few years, splitting your trust fund among themselves." Stunned, I struggled to process this chilling revelation. Norm continued, "Their plan isn't final yet, but poisoning your food has been considered, possibly through your wife's shock." Quickly replaced my disbelief. "The good news is they're still in the planning stages," Norm reassured us, also revealing that Roger, a chemist, was involved and capable of creating a lethal substance. I couldn't wrap my head around Candace's involvement, but why? I stammered. "We're married. She already has access to my assets. Why take such drastic measures?" My anguish was clear as I tried to make sense of the betrayal. Norm shrugged, noting that people often make irrational decisions when it comes to money. He assured us that while their intentions were sinister, no action had been taken yet, and his team remained vigilant. Struggling with the stress of the investigation, I sought counseling and discussed the details further with Norm, who provided Damon and me with a USB drive containing more evidence. Damon laid out a plan for the week, which involved preparing divorce papers and starting legal action against Candace's workplace and her accomplices. He also arranged for the condo to be sold and talked about notifying the police regarding the murder plot. That evening, I confided in Iona, who was horrified by what I was going through. The following days passed in a strange state of normalcy, though tinged with paranoia. I changed my accommodations each night to avoid potential threats. On Thursday, Norm called me to a meeting where Damon was already present, his expression serious. As we sat down, I braced myself for more bad news. Norm revealed that my work performance had deteriorated due to personal problems, prompting my boss to get Candace involved. My heart sank as I realized just how deeply they were meddling in my life. With a grim tone, Norm confirmed my suspicions. "So, my wife is enjoying herself with my boss, her boss, my lawyer, my friend, and a few others at work," I said with bitter sarcasm. Norm nodded solemnly. "Unfortunately, yes," he replied, recognizing the gravity of the situation. He then invited Damon to join our conversation to ensure he was up to speed on our next steps. Together, we crafted a strategy to keep them in the dark for as long as possible, giving me time to prepare for the chaos ahead. This meant keeping a low profile at work for the rest of the week before making any major moves. Even as we finalized our plan, I received a call from Candace, which I chose to ignore to keep up appearances. The following day, we held a farewell party at work to celebrate Iona's successful internship. During the event, she discreetly asked if I was doing okay, and we agreed to meet for drinks later. I stayed focused on work and was met with supportive smiles from colleagues as I finished my tasks. That evening, over drinks with Iona, I received a call from Mel, who suggested a trip to see the penguins near Phillip Island. She emphasized the importance of being surrounded by nature and friends during this challenging time. Grateful for the invitation, I asked if I could bring someone along. Iona looked at me curiously as I heard Mel chuckle over the phone. "Sure, what's her name?" she asked. Amused. "Her name's Iona," I replied, explaining she's the one who brought me up to speed on everything after we arranged the time and place. I hung up, and Iona gave me a curious look. "Did you just ask me out indirectly by calling another woman?" she teased. Noticing the panic on my face, she laughed, placing a reassuring hand on my arm. "Relax, Thomas," she said gently. "I get it, you need friends right now. So, where are we going? And did I hear something about penguins?" The next morning at 7:30, Iona and I met Damon, Mel, and Colleen at a gas station just outside of town. I was pleasantly surprised when they arrived in a bright yellow 2019 Mustang. The roar of the V8 engine was impressive as they pulled up next to my 2020 Volt looks. Like someone knows good taste when they see it, Damon joked as he greeted us. After quick introductions, we hit the road. Damon cracked jokes about the joy of having two big block V8 engines cruising together. And by the time we reached Phillip Island, I was smiling. Damon's love for racing and Iona's enthusiasm added excitement to the trip. We sang along to Spiderbait's cover of Black Betty as we drove. Spending the day with the penguins was a delightful experience. No matter how many times you see them, penguins never fail to charm. Enjoying fish and chips for lunch, I felt deeply appreciative of my supportive friends. Later in the day, Iona took my hand, and though I was still married, the gesture felt natural. Fidelity had always been important to me, and it still was, but I found comfort in her presence. Half an hour before we were ready to leave, Colleen orchestrated a walk with Damon and Iona, leaving Mel and me behind. Taking the opportunity, Mel confided that Iona was considering postponing her plans for the next month to help support me. Her offer caught me by surprise, but I appreciated Iona's gesture. As we neared the penguins again, Mel chuckled, signaling that the ride back would be as enjoyable as the outing. Seeing a tavern ahead, I told Damon that Iona and I would be making a quick stop before heading home. We parted ways, grateful for the time spent together. Iona and I enjoyed a casual conversation on the drive back, and once we arrived at the tavern, we settled in for a relaxed early summer evening. As dusk began to fall, we ordered food and drinks, enjoying the laid-back atmosphere. The mood, however, soon shifted to something more serious. Thomas, she started, and I met her gaze. I had mentioned a few things about Iona before, and now she was becoming an important part of my life. Born in Germany, Iona had moved to Australia when she was 4. She had a natural aptitude for numbers and was currently pursuing her graduate studies while interning across the country. Standing at just 5'2", she looked up at me as if reading my thoughts. "I can guess what you and Mel talked about. You're going through a rough patch, and right now, more than anything, you need a friend," she said, pausing slightly before continuing. "That's what I want to be for you above all else." A friend. Her gaze faltered for a moment, but she didn't let go of my hands. But she added, "Over the past few weeks, I've realized my feelings for you might go beyond friendship. Actually, I'm sure of it." Do you know what I mean? Her sincerity touched me deeply, especially given everything I was dealing with. She was expressing her interest in a deeper relationship, despite my personal chaos. "Iona, I started but then hesitated, sensing her disappointment. I squeezed her hands reassuringly. "You're an amazing woman. And you're right, I do need friends right now. But honestly, I found myself drawn to you as well." I left the rest unsaid. Life's pendulum can swing quickly between happiness and sorrow, and Iona had experienced both. She looked unsure for a brief moment, but then her face lit up with happiness. The rest of the evening was spent chatting about our shared interests, from movies and music to our mutual love of Mustangs. During our conversation, I opened up about my family's tragic history and the trust fund, which seemed to surprise her. "Why are you working at Simon Zach?" then she asked after hearing my story. I shrugged, explaining that I initially planned to work there for a few years to gain experience before starting my own investment firm, a dream I had discussed with my late father. However, my parents' sudden deaths had caused me to stay at the firm longer than expected. The mention of my family sobered the mood. "I'm so sorry," Thomas, Iona said, her voice soft. "When I look at you, I see a man who's focused and doesn't tolerate nonsense, even though you're so humble." I chuckled, appreciating her kind words. "Thanks," I said. "You're a good man," she continued, noting how calm I had remained despite the turmoil. "You haven't lost your temper, unlike them," she said, referring to my wife and her lovers. "No, not like how they're planning to deal with me," I replied grimly, unintentionally startling her. Realizing my mistake, I quickly filled her in on the key details from my investigators' findings: the plot to kill me after Candace's baby was born. Horrified, Iona's eyes filled with tears. "You're taking action, right?" "This is a crime," she insisted, her grip on my hand tightening as fear for my safety took over. I reassured her. "Damon is handling everything. It's all going to be set in motion next week." She released my hand but remained visibly shaken. "Your wife is planning to kill you," she exclaimed, her voice almost hysterical. We continued talking as we headed back to my car, with Iona clutching my hand tightly and anxiously scanning our surroundings. "It's okay, Iona," I said, giving her hand a reassuring squeeze. "We're safe. And if anyone's following us, I have a fast car. We can outrun them." Her laughter broke the tension, lightening the mood as we continued home. The drive was quieter, and when I dropped her off, we shared a warm hug. In a moment of vulnerability, I kissed her softly on the lips. We both blushed, suddenly aware of the new potential between us. As I drove away, I felt a mix of relief and gratitude for Damon, Mel, Colleen, and especially Iona. A few blocks later, my phone rang. It was Candace. "Baby," she said with concern, "where are you? I've been trying to reach you." "Sorry, Candace," I responded, explaining that I had spent the day at Phillip Island with friends. It was a great day, I added, recalling the fun we had watching Colleen with the penguins. They really make you appreciate life in a different way, I said, not entirely lying. Watching Colleen feed the penguins had been hilarious. At one point, a group of them followed her around, hoping for more fish. Maybe we can start trying for a baby when I get back, Candace suggested. You've been giving me nothing but trouble, she added, half jokingly. Yeah, sure, I thought sarcastically. A baby, so you can poison me later. See you soon, Candace, I said, changing the subject. How's the conference? Did you attend? I asked. Oh yes, the conference has been great. We did a lot of studying, she replied, oblivious to my suspicions. A group of us, including my boss, are heading out for drinks soon. Don't worry, my boss is watching over me to make sure no one crosses any boundaries, sure, I thought, rolling my eyes. As if this woman had any virtue left, I lost interest in the conversation, tuning her out as she prattled on. She ended the call with an "I love you," but I didn't bother responding. For the rest of the week, I arrived early at work each day, ensuring all my assignments were completed on time. I remained suspicious of Mary and William, sensing they were somehow in on whatever Candace and George were planning, though I couldn't yet figure out the details. As the week progressed, they made less eye contact with me, which only made me more suspicious. I continued changing hotels frequently, paranoia creeping in even before I discovered the plot against me. In the evenings, I spent time with Iona, packing up my apartment. We stored my belongings in a company-owned storage shed for free, and I had Candace's items moved out with the storage costs covered for a few days, giving her time to sort out her affairs. Each night, I reviewed Norm's reports. One evening, I accidentally showed Iona a few pictures from the report. Horrified, she rushed to the bathroom to vomit. When she returned, her anger was palpable as she expressed her disgust toward my soon-to-be ex-wife's behavior. Monday morning came and it was game day. The cheetahs were expected back early, while I was set to depart for a month-long trip to North Queensland. I went to work as usual, attending a staff meeting where William announced George's return the following day. For the first time since I started, I noticed Mary's watchful gaze, which made me suspect a deeper conspiracy. Before lunch, I declined an offer to join the group, quickly left, and started a search on my laptop before I made my exit, leaving my keys and access cards on my desk. I planned to resign, with Damon's team delivering my resignation letter later. At the office exit, the company driver met me and drove me to the airport. Iona bid me goodbye with one of her brief kisses, and at the airport, Damon and Mel saw us off. Damon handed me a new phone with a private number known to only a select few, ensuring discretion. Flying business class with Iona, we toasted with champagne on board. Upon landing, a driver took us to a cozy bed and breakfast where we would stay for the first week, run by an elderly gay couple. The BB had a breathtaking view of the sunset over the water, and our room came with a double bed, attached bathroom, double shower, and whirlpool tub offering both luxury and relaxation. The owners mentioned their recent renovations, which now included 2 king bedrooms and 4 superior rooms for a delightful stay. On the way from the airport to the hotel, I received a text from Damon. "It's done. You're free now. Turn off your phone," he advised, and I did as he said, feeling nervous. That night, as Iona and I settled into the room, we both felt the weight of unspoken expectations. However, there was no need to worry. After retiring to bed, we fell asleep peacefully. The next morning, Iona asked how I was feeling, and I responded enthusiastically, complimenting the previous night. She beamed, proud that her plans had worked, and we confirmed our commitment to one another over breakfast. We enjoyed the local cuisine and spent our days exploring sites like the Daintree Rainforest and the Great Barrier Reef. By the end of the week, I had completely forgotten about my phone until Damon, Mel, and Colleen arrived, bringing news of 9 arrests related to the murder plot, some of them people I knew. I leaned back, shocked. 9 people wanted me dead, I exclaimed. Sort of, Damon explained. None of them had personal grudges against you. They even described you as a nice guy. But they were all conspiring to profit from your trust after your death. They're blaming each other now? Except Candace. She broke down when she realized you were gone. She's currently under observation at Ramsay Hospital. I personally handed in your resignation, which led to the closure of your former workplace and immediate terminations. It's unlikely they'll survive much longer. It was a similar story at Candace's job. I was there when they arrested Mr. Ranwick Johnston. Quite satisfying. Actually, he added with a wink, no charges against me. We shared a laugh. What about Roger? I asked. They caught him too. His wife had no idea what he was up to. She thought he was away for work, not having an affair with a friend's wife. I offered to represent her pro bono. Damon revealed. Mel playfully slapped Damon's arm. Quit teasing. We all laughed, and Mel looked at Iona and me holding hands. Well, that didn't take long, did it? She remarked. Iona blushed before admitting, I asked him to stay with me that first night. I kept him busy, so he wouldn't dwell on things. The next morning, Damon had coffee coming out of his nose from laughing so hard at Mel's amusement, and I just grinned like the Cheshire Cat. Mel assured me, "You'll be fine," Thomas glancing between Iona and me. "She's a keeper." They stayed with us for the next week, joining us on day trips, overnight stays at casinos, and even a light airplane ride over the Daintree coast. Afterward, they returned to Melbourne while we flew to Brisbane, where Iona introduced me to her parents as her boyfriend, and I happily embraced the role. We made headlines one night in Brisbane, though my name was never mentioned. When Iona informed my parents, they nearly panicked until we clarified everything. Her parents were the epitome of honesty and integrity. During our journey, we spent a week in Brisbane, followed by another in Sydney. By the end of the month, neither of us could imagine life without the other. As our trip wound down, we started talking about marriage and children. I promised her that once my divorce was finalized, we would get engaged. It wasn't a traditional proposal, but she understood and was confident that I would propose properly when the time came. When the topic of children came up, she blushed. "I have something to tell you, Thomas," she began, her voice tinged with nervousness. "I might be pregnant," she admitted softly, waiting for my response. She sighed, adding, "My period is due in a few days, so we'll know soon." She looked at me expectantly. I chuckled. "Are you serious then?" I added honestly. "No, I've thought about it too. In fact, I've been secretly hoping for an accidental pregnancy. I can't imagine having a child with anyone but you, unfortunately." She woke up the next morning with her period. I kissed her softly, my disappointment clear, and whispered, "Maybe next month. In the meantime, we'll just have to practice more." As our vacation came to an end, we returned to Melbourne and spent the night at Iona's apartment. She had convinced her landlord to extend her lease for a few more months instead of moving north. It was a small apartment just outside the city, and Iona was a bit embarrassed after our luxurious stays at various BBs across the country. I teased her about every little detail of the apartment until she was laughing uncontrollably. The next day, we visited Damon's office to look for new places to live. During lunch, Mel surprised us by showing up with coffee. "What brings you here?" Iona asked, puzzled by her unannounced visit. "I heard you two were here, so I thought I'd drop by to check in and bring you some coffee," Mel replied, sipping her own. Sensing something was off, Iona asked, "Is everything okay?" Mel shrugged, but her expression hinted at concern. "It's nothing serious," Mel said. "I'm just not pregnant yet." Iona sighed, her disappointment evident. Moments later, Mel accidentally spilled coffee on the conference room table, prompting laughter from me. "Excuse me," I chuckled, explaining to Mel that Iona and I had decided to start trying for a baby after the past month. "We just decided to see what happens." "That's fast," Mel remarked, a hint of concern in her voice. We nodded in agreement. "Maybe," Iona added, gazing at me affectionately. Mel observed us for a moment, then changed the subject, asking why we were at the office. Upon learning that we were house hunting, she quickly offered to help. She spent the next couple of hours helping us define what we were looking for, including the possibility of accommodating a baby. Damon briefly stopped by, flashing a grin as he overheard the two women discussing plans in the kitchen. Over the next month, we toured several properties and eventually narrowed it down to 3 apartments in a shared house. Iona acknowledged it was my money, but I insisted that it would be our home and that we should choose together. Ultimately, we selected a penthouse in a slightly older building on the lower end of Collins Street. It had easy access to highways, fast public transportation, and plenty of dining options nearby. The apartment itself was stunning, with 3 cozy bedrooms and a spacious master bedroom that overlooked Melbourne Park. The building also featured amenities such as a pool, sauna, gym, and 24-hour concierge. With 2 parking spaces in the garage, we could easily park both my Mustang and the new Jeep Iona had just bought. It felt like we had moved into a luxury hotel we could now call home. With Mel's help, we furnished the apartment in a single afternoon, transforming it into a comfortable living space. Within a month, we were fully settled just in time, as Iona's period hadn't arrived that month. Fast forward almost 9 months and our son Jonah is now 6 months old. Our home is filled with baby-proofing on every surface as we've fully embraced parenthood. We turned one room into a nursery, another into a guest bedroom, and the third into a home office. Iona and I launched a new investment firm with modest capital, just a few $1 million for now, since I am still waiting for full access to my trust in a couple of years. Iona, who has a gift for numbers, owns a 10% stake in the company. Initially, she didn't want any ownership, but with Mel's help, I convinced her to accept. This led to our only disagreement. I hold 70% of the company, while an investor owns 15%, and Damon and Mel retain the remaining 5%, strengthening our close friendship. The difference between Damon the lawyer and Damon the friend continues to amaze me. In court, he was a formidable force, winning judgments against both Candace and my former employers, which led both companies into administration. However, because of their substantial assets, Iona and I were well compensated. Damon also secured a favorable settlement for Roger's wife, who received most of their assets, while Roger himself was sentenced to 30 years in prison, along with others involved in the plot against me. I received pleas for leniency from William and George, but I quickly dismissed them in front of Damon, who relished dismantling my former lawyer during the trial. While I hadn't focused much on Candace throughout the proceedings, she ended up with a 35-year sentence without parole. Her parents, the only ones who showed her any sympathy, eventually withdrew their support once they learned the full extent of her crimes. The judge granted our divorce based on her offenses against me, condemning her actions and the chaos they caused. Per our prenuptial agreement, Candace left with only her belongings and $155,000 to start over, an amount I placed in a trust for her future needs. Due to her mental health issues, she didn't attend the trial and was transferred to the medical wing of a medium-security prison. She requested a meeting with me, which I agreed to, ensuring it wouldn't interfere with the divorce. 6 weeks later, I found myself in a secure room in the prison's medical wing, waiting to see her. The room was stark, with a bolted-down table, chairs chained to the floor, and a one-way mirror, making the setting feel like a scene from a crime drama. It had been 10 tense minutes since the doctor and a guard had escorted Candace in. She looked disheveled, her once neat brown hair in disarray, reflecting her troubled state. Her eyes darted around, seeking something, maybe reassurance, maybe an escape, but when her gaze found mine, a strange calm seemed to settle over her, like the eye of a storm. However, one detail was impossible to miss. Candace was visibly pregnant, her swollen belly prominent even through her untidy appearance. A faint, almost serene smile appeared on her face. "I'm nearly a week overdue, Thomas," she whispered, placing her hand on her stomach. Concern filled me, but before I could respond, the doctor signaled for me to remain calm. I reassured Candace that everything would be fine, encouraging her to wait patiently for the baby's arrival. Then she began her confession. Laden with regret, she claimed that she had never intended to harm me, insisting that she had been coerced and manipulated by others. Her voice trembled as she admitted to the pressure she had felt to act when they deemed it the right time after the baby was born. The revelation hit hard, cutting through the tension in the room. Her words exposed the complexity of her involvement and the inner turmoil she had endured. Despite the emotional distance between us, she held on to a fragile hope, believing that our child could be a chance at redemption, a way to heal the rift between us. Her plea for forgiveness was quiet but clear, a thin thread tying us together across the chasm of our shared history. Struggling to find the right words, I felt myself torn between sympathy, doubt, and lingering pain. "Our baby will bring us back together," she implored. "Once the baby is here, I'll be released, and we can start fresh as a family. I'll protect you from them," she continued, her words spilling out in a chaotic rush. "You're my priority, Thomas. The others were distractions, more interested in each other than in me. They used me for money. Now it's just us and our baby for the next 15 minutes. Candace poured out her feelings, talking about reconciliation and hoping for a future together. Her moments of clarity alternated with deep regret. Tears streamed down her face as she owned up to her mistakes and admitted her guilt. "I betrayed everyone. I was greedy and unfaithful. I even plotted to hurt you. I'm a vile, awful woman who deserves punishment," she cried, growing more upset. In her anguish, she begged me to punish her as a way to atone for her actions. "I still love you, Thomas," despite everything she said, removing her prison clothes in a desperate plea for forgiveness. In a raw moment of vulnerability, Candace revealed the pain of knowing the baby wasn't mine and the deep remorse for her past. Feeling helpless, I stayed close as she wrestled with her inner demons. "It was meant to be yours," she repeated, her voice laden with sorrow, just as the doctor stepped in to help her regain stability. Reluctantly, Candace said her goodbye, whispering, "Live well, Thomas," a haunting reminder of our shared past and uncertain future. Then she left, leaving behind a trail of regret and unspoken longing. A week later, I received a phone call from Candace's doctor. He thanked me for visiting and informed me that Candace had given birth to a healthy baby girl. He mentioned they were conducting DNA tests to identify the father. In an unexpected show of foresight, Candace had suggested putting the baby up for adoption, wanting her daughter to grow up in a loving family instead of facing the uncertainties of foster care. That evening, still processing my encounter with Candace, I found comfort in Ayana as she placed my head on her stomach. I felt the soft kicks of our unborn son. The moment was profound, filled with the promise of new life, while contrasting the complexities surrounding Candace. 2 months later, our son John Thomas was born, bringing joy and a sense of responsibility. In a moment of compassion, I approached Damon about the possibility of adopting Candace's daughter. After thoughtful consideration, little Macy, Candace's child with Randy, became part of our family. Damon, always the dedicated lawyer, secured a small child support payment for Macy's future education, ensuring she had some financial security. Iona welcomed Macy with unconditional love, treating her as if she were our biological child. We strongly believed that no child should suffer for their parents' mistakes. Our family continued to grow, with Iona and I marrying a year later and welcoming a baby sister during our honeymoon, followed by a baby brother shortly after. When Macy reached adulthood, we felt it was the right time to tell her the truth about her origins and the story of her birth parents. It was a difficult week, filled with a range of emotions, but with Mel's support, Macy found comfort in the unwavering love of her family. A meeting with Randy turned dark, ending with his injury and eventual withdrawal. However, our reunion with Candace was different. Despite her fragile state, she was deeply moved upon seeing Macy, leading to a touching moment of reconciliation in the prison's visitor lounge. Macy, ever polite, approached Candace with kindness, guiding her to a table. Iona and I watched from a distance as Macy introduced herself, gently revealing that she knew Candace was her birth mother. Candace broke down in tears again, though we had already warned the guards about the emotional nature of the reunion. After a thorough security check, we were allowed a brief hug between Candace and Macy. Witnessing this heartfelt exchange between my adopted daughter and ex-wife moved me deeply. Iona, wiping away a tear, jokingly blamed it on the pollen. Soon after, Iona led me to Candace, and we spent the next hour talking. Candace expressed her gratitude for our decision to adopt Macy, admitting she had no idea what had happened to her daughter after giving her up. The adoption appeared to have had a positive effect on Candace's mental health, as her behavior had improved since the encounter, according to the prison staff. Though she still had time left on her sentence, the prison reported significant progress in her attitude following the reunion with Macy. Encouraged by Mel, Macy visited Candace on special occasions, slowly building a connection despite the distance between them. Though I had started to forgive Candace, it was clear that our relationship would never extend beyond basic civility. For Iona and me, Candace remained the person who had once betrayed me. Iona continued to guard me fiercely, always alert to any potential threats. Her loyalty showed in subtle ways, such as when she would scold in German whenever she sensed someone overstepping their bounds.